in my backyard with
Jenna
and Jody. And we're going to be talking a little bit about the local region, the environment, agriculture, lots of things that go on in, again, the Monadnock region. So, Jenna, how are we going to start this off?
We're going to talk about pollinators because pollinators are a huge part of our region. They're really important to our whole ecosystem, be it gardens, flowers, vegetable gardens, believe it or not. They have to do with all of our area.
Right.
Yeah.
And you know, I've read someplace where even though some plants are wind pollinators, or we might not think of some plants as being part of the process, we touch, with every meal that we have, we touch pollinators 5 or 6, 7 or 8 times.
Yeah.
Because we don't realize how many things we eat that took a pollinator.
Well, they say that if there weren't insect pollinators, then you would very quickly have a meal about 1/5 of the size. And within 3 months, actually, without insect pollinators, we believe that our life on this earth would not be sustainable at all.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about what we've got here on the table.
It's breakfast.
It's breakfast.
So what we have here is a nice bowl of fruit. We have some bananas and apples and oranges and different things. What we're going to look at is the fact that some of these were pollinated and some of them were not fully pollinated. And what they say with apples is if you didn't have a pollinator, you might have 12 apples on an apple tree that would be pollinated.
And we're talking about insect pollinators, right?
Right,
We're not talking
right.
about wind because
No.
apple trees need an insect to get to that flower
Yeah.
and transfer pollen.
Right.
Right.
And so for plants like apple trees that had a pollinator, you would have about 1,200 apples in comparison to 12 apples. So that's just
amazing.
out of this world. Yeah. So what I wanted to show you this morning is what a fully pollinated apple would look like. I have 2 apples here, and I'm not sure exactly what we're going to see because I haven't opened them up yet. But this is a beautiful round apple. It looks perfect.
Perfect.
This one here has one side that's a little bit shorter than the other. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to open up the original apple that's perfect. And I'm just going to check inside. What we're going to look for is a star. And you guys can check this out at home. But as you can see, there's a star inside here. And when we look at this, there's not a whole lot of seeds on this side. When we look at this apple, we're going to look for 2 seeds in each section. So I'm just going to...
So this is a 5-pointed star. So
5-pointed star.
There
Yep.
should be 10 then.
There should be
Okay.
10, yep. So I'm not going to go through this whole thing, but there's 2. There's 1 there. There's 1 here. Oh, there's 2 in that one. Looks like we pretty much have 2 in each one for this apple. Now I'm going to open up the second one.
So that's considered a good thing.
That's a fully pollinated apple.
10 seeds. So when you're looking for the future, if all of those seeds would then be able to go on and create another tree.
Right, and that's what Mother Nature's trying to do is...
Create more apple trees.
Right, right. It's not for us.
Right.
It's for her.
It's for nature.
Okay, so this one here is really kind of strange. It doesn't even show any stars. Let me just see a little closer what we can find here. I'm just going to cut across. Just see if we can find a star even. Because this one is the one that was lopsided. Okay, so this one is really kind of strange. It doesn't even show any stars. Let me just see a little closer what we can find here. I'm just going to cut across. Just see if we can find a star even. Because this one is the one that was lopsided. Okay, so this one, as you can see, it's got 1 big seed on this side here. So probably that part of the plant was really well pollinated. But over here, where it was lopsided, it wasn't very well pollinated. So as you can see, pollination is a really important thing for Mother Nature and for us.
And if there hadn't been any pollination, we wouldn't even be looking at the apple at all right now. So it's something to remember that not every flower on an apple tree gets pollinated, but the ones that do turn into apples. The ones that get pollinated perfectly end up in these beautiful large apples with 10 seeds inside. And then the ones that are lopsided probably just had part of that flower pollinated. And there's lots of different insects that pollinate, right?
Oh yeah, there is. You know, it's not just honeybees. There are mason bees. There's flies even that will pollinate.
And there's beetles.
Right, right. People just don't think about all the different pollinators that are out there. So pollination is really important, and pollinators are really important. So if we start doing things to our pollinators that are going to be killing them off, that's a problem. One other thing I just wanted to mention too is, would you like a glass of orange juice?
Oh, I'd love it. Yeah.
Okay, so we have orange juice here. This is a beautiful pitcher of orange juice, and I'm going to give you a full glass of orange juice.
Oh, great.
Okay?
Thanks. Yeah.
So I think you're very lucky, and yeah, that's a fully pollinated glass of orange juice. Now, for me, I'm going to have to cut down a little bit because my pollinators didn't go out and pollinate all the trees. And because, I didn't have very many pollinators in my area, so I only get 1/3 of a glass of orange juice.
So are you saying that without any pollinators, like this one, there were really healthy pollinators in the area of this, maybe orange tree, orange grove,
Yep.
and we got full pollination, lots of oranges. But in a different area, maybe we got, and I think that's even more than 1/3.
Yeah.
But you're saying that without healthy pollinators, we only end up with 1/3 of the oranges pollinated.
Yep.
Now, why would any of them be pollinated?
There's air. There may be some flies that went around, or something might have
Maybe
hit it.
air.
Yep,
brought
blowing
the-
a little bit. Yep.
Okay.
So there's a slight chance that it could happen, but nowhere near the pollination. Things that need pollination locally, especially pumpkins, any kind of squash, cucumbers, blueberries, strawberries. There's all kinds of things in your garden.
Different fruits.
Right.
So
right.
I know around here, I love to go blueberry picking, raspberry picking, things like that, we wouldn't have any fruit at all if it weren't for various kinds of pollinators.
Right.
Honeybees, bumblebees, flies, beetles, things like that.
Yeah. And so what would we do without pollinators? We would have hardly anything around, for vegetables and fruits and different things
Right.
like that. Again, there are other pollinators. We're not going to talk about honeybees so much today, but we are going to talk about pollinators because those in general are really important. One thing I just said I wasn't going to talk about honeybees. I am going to touch on honeybees a little bit.
So when we talk about colony collapse disorder, what does it have to do with our region so much? Do you think it's because colony collapse disorder is with honeybees, but all the things that might make that happen could be affecting all the pollinators?
Right.
But we just don't have a bumblebee keeper that would notice that the bumblebees are on the decline,
Right.
which they are. So when we talk about colony collapse disorder, we're really talking about sort of a symptom of a larger problem.
Right. With colony collapse disorder, they think that that's a lot of different things that have been pulled together and making the immune system of a honeybee or an insect reduced a little bit. So some of the theories they thought at one point were fungicides, GMOs, insecticides, pesticides, which we'll talk about in a little bit more, a little bit later. Some kind of viruses. For honeybees, varroa mites, which came over in the 1980s. It's a little bug that gets into the hive. And then also there was a thought that it might be cell phones.
Now, when you look at let's say if you went to your hives and it was affected by colony collapse, how would you know?
What happens in a honeybee hive, and the fact is that those are easily tracked, and that's why we can talk about honeybees.
Right.
But what would happen is the brood, which is all the eggs that have been covered over and are in a larva state, they would still be there. And some of the nurse bees, because bees have different things that they do in their lives, so some of the nurse bees and some of the larvae would still be there, and the queen would be there. But all of the field bees would be gone. So I do want to show you a little bit about what a honeybee frame would look like if it was infected by CCD. So when I was talking about brood and a few nurse bees and the queen, this is what we would find if it was CCD a problem. If it's a regular frame and it's looking healthy, this is what a regular hive would look like. It would be beautiful with tons of bees, queen, honey, pollen, brood, everything would be going just the way it's supposed to be going. It's really, really healthy.
So
And
would they be dead in the hive, or would they just be not there?
They just left. And that's what they were trying to figure out is why did these bees just take off,
Disappear.
never come back?
Never came home.
So it was also thought of like stress. You have thousands of beehives that are brought out west for the almonds and strawberries and different things like that. Yes, that is probably stressing, and we are stressing them out for a lot of things. But we're also doing things to ourselves that we don't realize too, I think.
Right.
So anyway, what we think it is now possibly, and this is just a theory, but there is this group of insecticides. They're called neonicotinoids. And what a chemical company has done is they have come up with a way to, instead of spraying crops, to put this coating on the outside of the seed. That alleviates having to spray, getting an airplane,
Right,
things
which
like
is
that.
great in a lot of ways, because
Yeah,
one
saves
thing we've
money.
learned with spraying is you spray and you're not just getting the pests that attack that crop, you're getting all kinds of other insects and critters also, and also endangering the humans. So Jody, we've talked about insecticides and different ones that are not so good for the insects. What are some of those that aren't so good for the insects? How would I know?
you've really got to read the back of the package. And many times they will give information as to what they will affect on the pollinators, but you just have to be really careful. So these are a few examples of some of the insecticides and pesticides that you can get locally that might not be your best choice. There's others that you can get that are organic, that use spores or soaps or different things that are maybe a little bit better for you. Commercially, it would be really tough to use those in a large scale because they're so expensive.
But in my garden, I could use some of these soaps and oils and sprays that are organic and natural.
Right. And you don't even have to buy a lot of them. A lot of the things that you use can be things that you find right in your house.
In the kitchen.
Right.
In the kitchen.
You know, to get rid of ants, even for the beehives, what we'll use sometimes is borax or cinnamon or coffee grounds. These are all things that the ants don't like to cross over. And so we use those for our beehives. Maybe we can use those a little bit around our house. Again, it's got to be cost effective, but we've got to think about what's better for us and better for the pollinators.
Now, when I go to one of these local garden stores and I'm finding I may have a problem in my garden, and I look at a package and I want to know if it's safe, I turn it around and I read the ingredient label, and then I'm confused because there's all these ingredients and I don't know what they are. So is that when I need to go online?
I think it is, because there's so many different chemicals that people can use. So look at some of these chemicals that we're listing here. Pay attention to them and do some research if you can, because if there's chemicals that you are using that have any of these names, you might want to make a decision to try something else.
You spray and you're not just getting the pests that attack that crop, you're getting all kinds of other insects and critters also, and also endangering the humans. So in one way it's great, they're putting it just on the seed, but then there's some problems.
Right. And what happens is a honeybee or a lot of other insects as well, because we're seeing the decline on those as well, what's happening is they're just landing on, say, corn. Corn is an air pollinator. Corn is one of the seeds that they do put this coating on. And what happens is a honeybee, all it has to do is land on that plant, and it will take in that toxin and carry it back to the hive. So this is the same as any other pollinator. What they're doing is they're taking it, not even knowing,
so
just
maybe,
by landing.
So maybe there's a droplet of moisture on that corn plant.
Right.
The honeybee needs a drink. It stops. It gets that moisture. That moisture has the toxin in it from the corn plant.
Everything
Gets to the bee. Wow.
Yeah, because on the corn plant you have the seed, and then you have the stem, and you have the leaves, and you have the hair, and honeydew. So there's anything that the bee might touch on that would pollinate, or excuse me, that would pass that toxin on to that insect. And that insect will bring it back home. So that's what the problem is with this group of neonicotinoids. And what I'd like you to do is go online, research it a little bit for yourselves, because it's really interesting how the United States hasn't done anything yet at this point, but some of the countries in Europe have banned some of these insecticides. And these insecticides are in hundreds of countries. So it's not just the United States that's seeing this, and it's not just Australia or Germany or any of this. They've all seen these kinds of things because the insecticides are being placed on all of these seeds.
Now, in the Monadnock region, are we talking about, say, corn, just corn, or are we talking about, who knows? Maybe if you're someone who's gardening or a small farmer, check your source of your seeds and find out.
Right, and it's not just seeds either. It's the insecticides that we use on our gardens, on our lawn, because all of these insects that we're trying to get rid of, these are bad insects to us, but it's also killing the good insects. So we have to find some kind of a balance there. In this area, we're pretty lucky because we don't have a lot of the monocrops. You know, we have gardens that have a good variety of products or plants. So when we grow things in our gardens, we have a great variety of things. Out west, when they do the strawberries, the almonds, you know, or blueberries and things like that. Do you want me to go again?
No, just
okay.
Pick up with blueberries and things like that.
And blueberries and things like that, they are focusing on one kind of product or one crop continuously. So they need to use different fertilizers continuously to build the soil. They need to use different insecticides because certain insects are like, hey, I know where to go for the food. So they go to those places, and that way it means that they need to use something to get rid of the pests. What happens is then the pests decide to have or build up their immunity, and then they've got a problem there because they got to find something else to use.
Right.
So I think what we've got to do is, it's hard with the monocrops because
Which
those
luckily
guys,
we don't have a lot of that here.
right, but we need them.
Right.
Because
They feed us.
We're human. Yeah,
Right, they
it feeds
feed
us. We've got to find some way to have that work together so we don't have to use quite as many chemicals in order to
Produce our food.
Right, right. So we're lucky around here. We have the CSAs, we have, farm stands, we have our own gardens. You don't really need, all that much space to have your own garden. So a lot of the things that we can do for ourselves to make things better is not use the insecticides and grow plants and vegetables and flowers.
Now, have you seen any evidence of CCD or colony collapse disorder in this region at all?
I can't say that we have.
Good.
Yeah, that is
Yeah.
really good. And some people have thought that they might have had it, but it's hard to say whether it is or not because you really have to go under a microscope, look at all of the guts of the bees or the insects to see what's really going on.
Right, and you haven't had any problems with your hives.
No, my hives are looking beautiful this year, and we'll look at those in some future programs. But it's not something that I'm really worried about here, but it's something that we all have to pay attention to.
Be aware
because
of.
This is food that's going into
Another
our
one.
bodies.
Let's go back a little bit where
Okay.
she asked if you've seen any incidences of it in this region.
Okay.
Because that's,
Where he started coming in?
yeah. And there's not a logical breaking point.
Before that.
Okay.
Okay. I'm just going to wait a minute.
Yeah. So I'm going to start up here and then back off.
Yeah. I was sitting up to look at that stuff, and then I was like, I've been sitting up like this for a long time. Kind of uncomfortable.
Okay.
So have you seen any instances of CCD right in your hives or in this area?
I haven't really, but it is something that we do need to think about because just because it's not here now doesn't mean that it couldn't reach our region a little bit stronger. People need to be able to read the packages that they use. And the funny thing about some of the neonicotinoid packaging says that you can use it when flowers are in bloom. I'll say that again. You can use that when flowers are in bloom, but not when bees are flying.
But bees are always flying when flowers are in bloom.
Yeah. So I don't know how you're supposed to do that. Now, the things that you can do is when you use insecticides and pesticides is use them at night or use them when the bees are not flying, and then it gives a smaller chance of the bees coming in contact
Picking
with
it
it or
up.
the pollinators.
I think the main thing too for anyone that's watching that's interested in helping pollinators to survive and to be as healthy as possible is to really educate yourselves. I liked your idea of going online, looking up neonicotinoids, looking up some of these other pesticides to make sure that you're not putting them on your garden. And that way it'll help all of the pollinators. The bumblebees, like we said, are sort of an indicator of what may be happening in the area to other species
Right.
of pollinators. And we can talk about that again in future programs, but that's something that we all want to be aware of in our region.
Right, right. So if you're interested in more information about my backyard, you can go to our email address, which is inmybackyardch8 for channel 8. So inmybackyardch8@gmail.com, and give us your suggestions on what you'd like to see. The other thing that we're really interested in doing is having some participants in the show. And we're looking for students that would be interested in joining us, maybe a couple of students at a time, talking about specific topics, maybe going into the beehives.
Looking at basically,
pollinators.
yeah, if you're interested in some particular aspect of nature in the Monadnock region and you are want to send us an email, want to suggest some topics, or say, hey, I'd like to be on a show, I'm really interested in salamanders in our area, whatever it might be, then shoot us an email and we can maybe have you on a future show.
And that email is, again, it's inmybackyardch8@gmail.com. And Jenna and I will be picking it up and getting back to you as soon as we can.